Ladies and gentlemen, our purpose for gathering in Jerusalem is to affirm our common civilization based on shared values and timeless principles, and acknowledging the foundational rule of law which protects life, liberty, and personal property. These Judeo-Christian principles, these timeless principles, strengthen our societies and democratic institutions and contribute to empowering our fellow citizens. You and I are the guardians of this common civilization, our heritage. Convened today in Jerusalem, the eternal city, with a unified voice and message that we support Israel's sovereignty and that we stand with Israel as friends, partners, and trusted allies.
Our nations face serious threats at home and abroad. It is vital to our national health and security that we be steadfast with like-minded allies against jihadists, against tyrants, and yes, even against overburdening government laws and regulations that smother initiative, creativity, and freedom. I entreat, I beg, I challenge every American to learn about and seek understanding of our common bond, our shared principles, our common civilization. Find out just how much our Israeli friends contribute to a better life for all Americans, for peoples everywhere. Make the common bond we share one of the head as well as the heart.
We dare to fight for our values because many of our citizens are waking up as the result of failing welfare policies, massive unemployment, mass immigration, or barbarian radical Islam. They deliberately came to Europe, and we have to adapt. This goes from separate hours in the pools between women and men, to inequality between gender in the inheritance allocation, what they call Sharia law. Americans, European, and Israeli, the Western civilization, we are in the same boat, facing the same challenges and threats. It should be clear. We will be victorious together, or we will fail together. This is what is at stake. So let us together meet this challenge.
This is the Balkan route. It has existed for decades. And now we see the same route being used by migrants coming into Europe. The coexistence of rampant political corruption and organized crime in post-communist Eastern Europe, combined with money laundering, which is facilitated by Western banking and corporate entities, have been major factors in regional conflicts and economic instability. Sanctions against Iran, which US State Department described as the most active state sponsor of terrorism, have been regularly obstructed by the same Western actors. The Balkan route has been used by organized crime and terrorists for arms, drugs, human and organ trafficking, and terrorism financing. UN reports indicated that Balkan heroin trafficking brings in more than $20 billion annually, providing financing for Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. Kalashnikovs from the Balkans were used in the January 2015 attacks, killing 17 people.
The rule of law is basically that the same laws apply equally to all, meaning that nobody can be above the law. The application of the rule of law is most obvious in two areas, that is the protection of private property rights and corruption.
We have a parallel legal system in Britain. It is called Sharia law. In my country, tolerance has led to intolerance. We turn a blind eye to practices we would never condone. There are 85 Sharia courts in Britain today. where the word of a woman is only worth half that of a man. This influx, ladies and gentlemen, and I've said this in the European Parliament, and I know it's quite controversial, makes the next attack on our continent not a case of if, but when and where. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are sacrificing the security of our own citizens on the altar of political correctness and multiculturalism.
The rule of law makes a difference. If democracy is going to work, if people are going to control their lives, they have to have something. They have to have a basic set of rules. And that's being hijacked. And hopefully by coming here today and speaking in Israel, which is the bastion for democracy in the Middle East, and that does follow the rule of law, it can help spread the message that it should be adhered to elsewhere.
Tech business is on fire. There's never been a better time to be a tech investor, entrepreneur, or company in Israel. We went from 2.2 billion in 2013 to 5 billion this year. Today, Intel represents 10% of Israel's exports. 10%. Intel employs over 10,000 people in the country. They just announced a $6 billion further investment in the country literally 2 weeks after the war ended last year. Now, if we simply unleash entrepreneurial spirit, get government the heck out of our business, okay, and let us go ahead and do what we need to do, that will provide an engine for economic growth and for continued wealth creation. The bottom line is, anybody who really wants to boycott Israel, you have to unhook the internet, because God forbid, God forbid you should use a Cisco product or a Google product. You shouldn't go on Facebook, because those guys are all over this place. You shouldn't ever use Intel, okay? That means throw away your computers.
Just because we face these threats, the urgency to advance economic freedom is even more stronger, because only if we are strong, if we have strong economies, if we have growing economies, we can effectively protect ourselves against these threats. So if we want to have strong armies, we must be economically free.
Wide spectrum of threats that we have to contend with, one at the same time. It's not just Iran, it's not just Syria, it's not just Hezbollah, it's not just Gaza. One has to be in a situation where you have to take on even further threats, like the issue of ISIS, which is becoming, in my opinion, a growing problem for obviously for the area as a whole, but also for Israel in terms of how it's developing, continuing to expand, and at this point does not appear to be receding.
We left Gaza unconditionally, hoping to find in Gaza a regime that will try to develop its own society, its own economy, and try to create a Singapore in the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, it didn't take long before the Hamas threw their brothers from the third floor with their heads down, the Fatah, and took over the regime and the control on Gaza. Since then, almost every other year, and I participate also as a pilot in these operations, they're trying to harm our own people, and they're shooting rockets on our cities. They're trying to dig tunnels.
Israel is a very strong country. Israel is a very powerful country, not only militarily. First, our morals and values. Second, our technology, the people's capabilities, the military. Israel will exist here forever. We need to make sure that we prepare this country for the next generations the best we can. And peace is a very essential component.
There is no freedom without the law. Actually, whether threatened by anarchy on one hand or tyranny on the other, people are not at liberty to live freely without the protection of order and law. As an American, one of the many reasons that I am pro-Israel is that they stand alone in this region for freedom, property rights, and the rule of law. Simply put, we are allies in defense of freedom with order. Historically, we stand on high ground in common cause with one another.
I do agree with President Obama when he says we are not at war with 1.6 billion Muslims, okay? I do agree with him when he says the vast majority of Muslims in the world are not terrorists. They are not dangerous to us in the West or anyway. In a world of 1.6 billion Muslims, 10% is 160 million people. Okay, that's half the population of the United States. If you group them all in one country, the Islamic Republic of Radicalistan, you would have one of the largest countries on the planet. So you cannot say it's insignificant or not a serious threat.
Why one category of Sunni Arab countries do not help their Sunni Arab brethren to get shelter in these countries that are importing millions and millions of foreign workers from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from the Philippines, Malaysia, etc., etc. It's just not happening, and our problem is that we're not raising that issue. The Obama administration, to the best of my knowledge, did not go to Qataris, Kuwaitis, and Saudis and said, take these people, these are your people.
Mainstream media would call this a refugee crisis. Others would call it a migrant crisis. We will call it invasion. Because when tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people come collectively in an organized manner and cross the border intentionally, in violation all the time of the laws, this is an invasion. The most important aspect is the destruction of the fabric of the society. Those who are coming are 80% men, young men, but they are also in a very large majority, 95% Muslim. By the way, when they claim or you claim that it's a refugee crisis, it's not. According to official statistics, only 20% of those arriving comes from Syria. The other one comes from Pakistan, Iraq, Somalia, Afghanistan, but certainly not Syria.
The British government commissioned a study from a reputable economic think tank on the relative carbon emissions of imported refined petroleum products as compared to petroleum products refined in the UK. Because an awful lot is coming in from all around the place these days, all around the world. Their conclusion was that on average, refined petroleum products imported involved 35% higher CO2 emissions than refined petroleum products in the UK. The result of that, as you can see, is that we have raised prices, we have forced pensioners into fuel poverty, we have driven energy-intensive businesses offshore entirely, we have closed plants, we have destroyed jobs, but also, ladies and gentlemen, we have increased global CO2 emissions. How is that for the battle against climate change?
We're on a roadway to serfdom with the rate at which we are accumulating debt in many countries. And we're sort of led to believe that it doesn't really matter because it's sometime in the future. No, it's right now that we need to do something about it. So economic freedom in the 21st century, in other words, prosperity, is going to go to those places that do the best job of developing and utilizing the brain power of their people. And there are 3 countries now, I used to say 2, but there are 3 countries now that I think are extraordinary. And they are Hong Kong, Singapore, and now Israel. These are tiny, tiny nation states that have virtually no resources at all, except people. They are 3 of the most successful countries in the world because they have learned how to convert people into prosperity. And what we need to learn from it also is how they went about it. And they went about it because they allowed their people the freedom to do exciting things.
to create new ideas, to be innovative, and not to be controlled by an interfering government.
See you next year in Jerusalem.